It is now time for our keynote address, Bridging Borders in Cybersecurity. I'm joined by the Deputy Assistant Director of FBI Cyber, Cynthia Kaiser, Head of Cyber Intelligence at the UK National Crime Agency, Will Lyne, and Secureworks' Don Smith is back with us for this too. We're going to unpack the role of international cooperation and public-private partnerships in countering the impact of cybercrime and cyber threats. So folks, it's great to have you with us for this. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Of course. So Cynthia, can I launch into this with you because it has been such a strong year for law enforcement with high-profile takedowns and disruptions. Are you okay to briefly reflect on that past year with us?
Of course, because it's a really exciting year. We've had, even just in 2024, over 30 disruptions of ransomware groups alone. And really, in the last 2 years, we've been able to provide decryptors to victims globally at the tune of $800 million. And that's huge. When you look at some private sector information that says how much ransomware has been paid, it's around 1.8, 1.9. So when you take there could have been 800 million more, and that doesn't count all of the remediation costs, businesses being down, et cetera. That's a huge impact that we've been able to have with our partners and giving relief to victims. And this is all really part, I think, of our strategy to be able to make it harder and more painful for actors to succeed. And we do that by really thinking about, how do you creatively take down the full ecosystem around them. So the actors, money, the infrastructure they're using, the people they're going towards, and being able to do that holistically and share that across all of our international and private sector partners, it's really been great to see the huge impact we can have.
Rather than just sort of hammering each issue as it comes, trying to connect everything. For sure. Thank you so much. Will, it'd be great to get your view on this too. What do you attribute the success to?
Yeah, so I agree with Cynthia. It's the coming together and the learning that we've taken as law enforcement partners, working really closely with folks in the private sector, this ecosystem approach. So going after the things that support and enable the cyber criminal business model, particularly with respect to things like ransomware. And we know that ecosystem lowers the barrier of entry and proliferates tools and capabilities that threat actors used against us. And I think we've seen over time some of the brilliant successes from Hive last year all the way through to the NCA-led Lockbit activity just quite recently. And there's more to come on that as well, by the way. That really coming to fruition and us being able to really deliver impact. So we're undermining trust and confidence in the worst threat actors. We're undermining trust and confidence in the platforms that they're using and the capabilities they're using to wreak harm and havoc on people around the world.
And I think for me, this year, that subtle shift with Kronos into degrading the trust between the threat actors on top of, as Cynthia said, adding friction to the whole supporting ecosystem. It's just been a fantastic year to look at the successes that your two organisations have had. It's been brilliant to watch from the sidelines, really brilliant.
Although along with reflecting on that success, now it's about maintaining that momentum, sustaining that pressure, not to rain on your parade. But Will, can I come to you? It's clear that operations like this need careful collaboration between nations, but arguably more so between operational teams in those nations. So how are the NCA and the FBI working together to continue achieved success?
The NCA and the FBI have a brilliant, almost unparalleled relationship, but this is actually a coalition of partners from the Five Eyes countries, so Canada, US, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK, but also our really close European partners as well, and some partners from further afar. So in the Kronos Lockbit disruption, for example, we have partners from Japanese law enforcement involved. So I think it's the coming together of that community, the alignment of our strategies and approach from that ecosystem type model, and the way that we're going after and trying to deliver impact. I think it's the constant learning that we've taken from that, and the sharing has really been kind of like unparalleled in that. And we're demonstrating now that we are learning, we are joining up, and we are synchronizing, and we're coordinating activity to deliver more strategic impact at any one point in time. And of course, we want, as everybody else wants, as the private sector wants, long-term strategic impact and long-term degradation of the threat. And so, yeah, we've had successes, but we have to keep learning, we have to keep pushing, we have to keep evolving our response as the threat evolves against us as well. So a constant challenge to keep up, but one that we are working really, really hard and really, really closely in the fight against.
That's the painful thing about your industry. You can never rest on your laurels because the bad guys are never resting either. Cynthia, can I come to you then on that as well? You know, with recent operations against ransomware groups, how are you sustaining that pressure across borders, and are we seeing big changes in how threat actors are responding?
Well, I think, pulling back, it's not like the ransomware actors care where their victims are. Right. So, needing to do all this international collaboration because we want to counter these actors, it's because they don't care about borders. And so we have to also, really pull down those barriers that in the past we were looking more insularly about, like certain crime, and be able to partner. And I think really the NCA and FBI this year have been able to partner probably more than ever before on cybercrime, which is really exciting. The FBI has been working to try to just increase overall its international presence. And so when you have satellite offices, people in embassies, et cetera, we're able to cover probably over 180 different countries, territories, islands, et cetera, so that we can really try to get after these actors. And I think there's a few good examples of this. One is Lockbit. As you noted before, the work between NCA and FBI, as well as many other countries that were involved in this, it showed that we weren't just charging, or we weren't just taking down one server, that we were really holistically looking across to say, how can we take down the communications, the ways in which the actors are trying to put out victim information, but also, also do charges, also do the rewards, the things that are the bread and butter of all of our operations. How do we integrate that into some really new and innovative thinking? I think that that's a really great example. But another good example is when we conducted with international partners an operation to take down Alfie Black Hat. That was towards the end of last year. And why I think that's interesting is, one, we were able to get out lots of decryptors to victims to help them get their systems back online. But two, it actually showed a battle over the control of infrastructure where we went back and forth, and that battle continues today to try to ensure that we're taking away their tools. And of course, they want their tools back. But that's what's really critical. And I think part of the change in what we're doing is that we recognize these are battles. These could be temporary, and that's okay, because temporary relief to victims is real relief.
Right.
And even if a group is only down for 2 months, that means 2 months of not targeting victims in both our countries and really overall. And so I think that having this kind of changed mindset of what does it mean to help and what does it mean to counter is really critical to us being able to sustain that pressure in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. You folks are really focused on technology and strategy, but also attitude, like you put it, is a huge factor in the success of your collaboration. Donna, can I come to you then? Just on Secureworks' role in this, they've been involved in large-scale threat intelligence efforts as part of your overall mission to secure and protect organisations around the world. But can you tell me a little bit more about how you work with law enforcement in that way?
Yeah, so Secureworks has been working with law enforcement in various geographies and national cyber authorities for many, many years, well over a decade. And the way we work has evolved over that time. I'm going to use words that Cynthia and Will have already used: partnership and trust. What you find is that our objectives in terms of defending our customers are the same, and we're not bringing people to justice, but we want to stop the badness. So it's easy for us to justify effort, to build relationships, to build that trust, where over time law enforcement agencies can work out if we've got something that can give them a slightly different aperture, if we've got something that can help understand how the bad guys are evolving. So hopefully we've got little bits of information that complement the view that you guys have with your access to big SIGINT machines and things like that. And that trust then gets us into a position where we can work together on occasion on really fascinating projects, which are a great thing for me and my team. They're a great thing for Secureworks customers. But, stopping bad guys is a team sport. So it's a great thing for everyone in any economy. and it's a pleasure working with these guys. It really is. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting how, as Cynthia said, we're integrating all these different elements, all these different ways to disrupt the threat actors in our in what we're delivering now. So there's always a multi-pronged attack against the threat actors, and we totally acknowledged in the messaging and the comms on Kronos that actually we recognise a technical takedown isn't a panacea, but with all the other elements of the operation combined. And I think that's the same with partnering with folks in the private sector. It's so brilliant to get that perspective in, and I think unlike traditional serious crime, whereby in things like drug trafficking, for example, law enforcement have got a really good grip on the fields where drugs are grown, all the way through to the routes they come to the UK and dealers, all the way down to kind of a street level drug users. But actually, with cybercrime, we absolutely recognise there is enormous expertise, a wealth of expertise that exists in the private sector, and it's brilliant to be able to tap into that and tap into those perspectives and build the relationships that we have to deliver outcomes for the public.
And just a willingness to help. Everyone in Secureworks wants to make a difference, and the way that we can make a difference is by supporting law enforcement.
Yeah, and I think you said, leveraging their expertise and leveraging their passion, but it's also just leveraging where information is and where the private sector might have better relationships with certain customers and they're getting different types of telemetry and information in, and law enforcement has different types, and it depends on which one across which borders has that. I think more so in any other area for countering cybercrime, you have to bring everybody together because we all have these little tiny pieces.
Can I ask Cynthia, Will kindly talked about why it's helpful, I suppose, for you folks in the NCA to get that contribution and that insight from the private sector. Can I ask for your opinion on the vice versa of that? What can the private sector help you with, or what can they add that you need?
Well, let me peel that back a little, because I think it's interesting to think through what it might look like in the beginning of a campaign. And then I think that goes towards what really helps, which is, I'm going to talk a little on Volt Typhoon, which is, everybody knows, is these Chinese government-backed cyber actors who are targeting critical infrastructure, mainly in the US, a little abroad. And as we started learning about this campaign, 2021, really, I think a little more in 2022, we were deploying the FBI to, a certain site within critical infrastructure and saying, well, gosh, we can see this actor and they're anchoring in on this one tool that's, native within Windows and going across. And I think we've seen this before. We've seen it over here. At the same time, I think Secureworks, Microsoft, Lumen, our partners at, across our own US government, we were all getting those kind of like little tiny hints of, this is bad, this is happening, but it's actually really hard to attribute this to. Right. And so I think being able to really share those, hey, we saw them anchoring here, and yeah, they've also been using this tool and this tool. It helped us get to attribution for whether it's a customer or whether for us it's victims that, we're going out to that have asked us to come. Being able to get that full picture and really understand what's going on and how to counter it, we can't do it alone. We have to have the private sector being willing to tell us, hey, we're seeing something suspicious. And then have the other government agencies be able to say, yeah, us too, and share with the private sector back, so we can really create these holistic pictures. And I think that comes to fruition, and it builds on itself, because last week we were able to announce that we took down a different Chinese botnet called Flax Typhoon. And in that case, we had a private sector partner that we were working really closely with to be able to build that out, to say, like, how do we counter this? How do we take it back? And being able to have all of that like partnership and being able to pursue that, it helps. It especially helps when groups like this Flax Typhoon tried to DDoS us back and tried to take back their own infrastructure. And we ended up in this back and forth where, because we had the information we had from all the variety of sources, we were still able to counter them and get to a point where all that infrastructure was burned and it's no longer harming critical infrastructure across the US and across all of our allies.
Fantastic. Can I ask, you've talked about this bridging and this collaboration. Where does that come from, or where did it start? How did it begin? How did we get here?
It's a good question. I think in some ways the FBI deserves recognition for initiating the setup of the NCFTA in Pittsburgh. I don't know how many years ago that was, probably 15 years ago, which brought together industry, and back then the banking sector was important because of banking trojans, and law enforcement in the one place with embeds from the National Crime Agency. And that's indeed one of the places where Secureworks' journey in collaboration with law enforcement came from. We had staff in the NCFTA for years. So there's that. But I think, going back to Cynthia's comments, the Volt Typhoon in particular, somebody started to make brave decisions about saying, we're not going to hold on to this intelligence, we're going to share it with trusted partners, and we know that if we do that, we might understand a little bit more about these actors, a little more breadcrumbs, and that all got added together in the hunting guide that ultimately was published by yourselves, CISA, and the NSA in May last year. And that was a brave decision, because years previously, people would have looked at that and said, oh no, we need to hang on to that, that's our view, and that really was one of the changes that we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years in terms of sharing.
I love that. Like, I love the term brave decisions. I hadn't really thought of that. And because I think those are happening on the private sector side too, though, right?
Yeah.
Being willing to share with government and figure out how to do that in a way that protects customers, but also protects customers' future it is that interesting evolution, and it does take people willing to do something different and new.
That's right.
It's that cultural shift in law enforcement that I think we're seeing, that we're getting better at as we are running more and more operations online, as the threat, from serious crime in the UK is moving more and more online. It's that dare to share approach that we need to get better at. When Don and I and the lead investigator for Lockbit from the NCA met with some other industry folks last year, and just kind of laid out what the opportunities might be. And immediately we came away from that meeting with loads of ideas and thoughts and the perspective from those industry partners on how we might approach it and how we might do it differently and how we can take in the learning from everything we've done.
It was also quite stressful being trusted with that information.
I think it was good though. We came away from that meeting kind of energized and with new ideas and with a new way forward. In a way that perhaps we hadn't before. So just, bringing folks in early and daring to share and building that trust, I think is so important.
Think about from the bad guys' perspective, knowing that, like, while there's smart bad guys out there trying to, harm us, there's a host of private sector and government all in a room trying to figure out the best way to take them down and take their operations down. And that has to be a little nerve-wracking for them, right? And I hope it is.
Yeah.
Well, now that we've kind of reflected on some brave decisions, some new dare and share approaches, a little bit of stress, can we kind of talk about what we expect on the horizon then? Looking ahead, what are you keeping an eye on in terms of both challenges and opportunities in this sector?
We want to keep stressing Don out.
That's where we like him. What else?
I don't know. I mean, obviously, as friction is added into the landscape for ransomware, it does add entropy, so that makes the challenge harder. I think also, from my perspective, there's always the worry that groups learn from each other, that we have groups that previously were focused on BEC, understand how to do ransomware or stealing cryptocurrency or whatever. So the crossover worries me in terms of threat actors, but I'm sure Will and Cynthia have some better suggestions than that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how that ecosystem, that online cybercrime ecosystem, is really evolving at the moment. I think there's less trust than there was previously in big centralized platforms, big cybercriminal forums and marketplaces that people used to frequent. So lots more many more transactions that might be peer-to-peer, for example, as opposed to going to a big marketplace. And that presents some opportunities and some challenges for us within the law enforcement and private sector community. And that I think there's a bit of a fragmentation. So there's many more ransomware groups than there have been at any one point in time at the moment. And we're also seeing, I think, really slowly, perhaps the start of a shift of the move away of the locus of kind of like Russian-speaking threat actors dominating the ransomware landscape. We are starting to see more and more ransomware operations coming from different types of jurisdictions. And the playbook that I think we really successfully developed as the community over the years is less applicable for threat actors that don't reside in those particularly difficult to reach jurisdictions. So we're going to have to keep evolving and adapting as the threat changes. But we're tracking it and we're actively doing that at the moment.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to say a buzzword, which is AI, but I think it's from both angles, where I worry about in the cybercrime ransomware space a little more, because where like Gen AI is right now, it can help some of these lower level folks become a little better. And so being able to make more believable phishing emails or check their coding errors, things like that. I worry about those novices getting to the point where they could do some harm using some of that, some of the AI capabilities out there. But at the same time, I worry that we as a community of people who want to counter ransomware and cybercrime, that as we're looking to develop our own capabilities, there's so much data out there. Like we're going to have to use some of these AI capabilities to be able to analyze, to be able to continue to counter the actors. If we don't do it in a coordinated way, if we aren't organizing our data the same, if we're not like figuring out ways, not just to share incident by incident, but really figure out ways to share the data that we have and the ways that we need and the tools that we're developing to be able to do that, obviously like through our ethics boards, like in the right way, we could end up getting outpaced, right? Some of the things that we're doing now, could start to lessen the impact. And so I think for me, what's like the future? What does the future hold? I think it's collaboration, not just operationally, but on what does the future of our work look like? What does the future like that we can build together mean? And I think that's a really important aspect to like as we're talking about all these and so excited about all the success, I want to keep it up. And so as we look, I really hope that we can all continue to work together in this way, but really thinking of how do we do this?
And how is it going to change?
Right.
And how do we keep adapting
That's
without
right.
getting exhausted?
We're always exhausted. We're in
Well, these lights are very flattering. Well, just with about 2 or 3 minutes left, Donna, I wanted to come to you. We've been talking about, cross-border collaboration, public and private sector collaboration. What might your closing comments be on this topic with the panelists that we have here?
Well, I think we just need to continue to do more of the same. I mean, the levels of trust, the mechanisms within which knowledge is shared, they're all much, much better this year than they were last year, and last year they're much, much better. I think if I have a concern, it's that both on the cyber defence side, we look for patterns of behaviour that identify badness, and law enforcement, I guess, perhaps bluntly, is set up to identify criminal conspiracies. And where we start to see perhaps more lone wolf actors with unpredictable playbooks, that's the thing that's going to really challenge us. And that's where we're going to have to really remove any friction in terms of information sharing between law enforcement, national cyber authorities and industry.
Will, your thoughts just to close? Anything that you'd want to leave the folks watching with?
So I don't know, coming to me for the closing. No, I totally agree with what Don and Cynthia said. We have to keep partnering, we have to keep collaborating, we have to keep learning and evolving our approach and keeping up with the threat. And just touching on something that Cynthia said, I think the fantastic thing about the relationship, for example, between the NCA and the FBI is that it goes deeper than just operational, transactional collaboration. It's really deep integration operationally, but it's tool development, capability development, intelligence analysis sharing. It's a much broader spectrum than just Operation X, Operation Y, and that's fantastic. And that's huge mutual benefit to both organisations and a value and a partnership that we enormously value. In the same way with the private sector, we just keep evolving that relationship. Something we've been had going for become like a decade or more now.
That's right,
But as Don says, as the threat changes, as the issues that we face change, as AI comes along and kind of changes the landscape a little bit, keeping up and keeping going with that and keeping delivering for the public outcomes to protect the public is enormously important for us.
Well, great. It's actually very reassuring and optimistic a note to end it on, so I will leave it there. But Will, Cynthia, Don, thank you so much. It was great to have a keynote.
Thanks.
Thank you.